Hey guys, Chauncey Phillips here with my September 30th DVD update, where I talk about all the DVDs and Blu-rays that I've received to review and talk about for you guys over the last 2 weeks or so. Like I always say, guys, enjoy these update videos. Definitely give this video a thumbs up. Leave me comments below what you guys thought of the titles I checked out and reviewed this update. Any titles coming up that you guys like me to review for future updates, and some of the DVDs and Blu-rays that you guys have picked up recently. Now, the first one I got here from Shout Factory's Scream Factory line. This is one that I was really interested in seeing. It's a movie that stars Ethan Embry. I've always been a fan of him since the, Dutch, Can't Hardly Wait, National Lampoon's Vegas Vacation. It's a movie that he's in called The Devil's Candy. This is actually a pretty cool horror movie. Actually, and it was a very grim film as well. And it stars, the other guy in this is a great character actor who was in, I think Vacancy and a bunch of different movies. He's always really cool, a lot of really creepy kind of roles that he's played. Well, it's basically though about Ethan Embry and his family that move into this house, and they get this house out in the middle of nowhere for really, really cheap. And you find out though that there is a history of some weird things and bad stuff that had happened in this house in the past. And Ethan Embry's character is a painter. And right when he gets to this house, though, he starts, having this inspiration, after not having a lot of inspiration for quite a while, and he starts painting these, really grim, very, dark images, and he's kind of, almost getting into, a trance when he's painting these things. He starts painting these things, and then he kind of, loses track of time. He's supposed to pick up his daughter at school. He starts painting, and then, it's all of a sudden, it's, 6 hours later, and he's late picking her up by hours. He has no idea. He felt like he was only in there for, 30 minutes, so, time is kind of flying by. And then when he's, done, he has these paintings that he, really doesn't even remember painting. He doesn't even know how these things came to him. It's essentially, though, about, the character I said, there's the character actor, he lived in this house, and it's kind of he's lurking around, too, because, he used to live there, so you see him throughout the movie kind of lurking around, spying on them, being very, very strange, and, he's really up to no good, and some really dark stuff going on with him that he's up to. Like I said, I don't want to tell too much about this movie. It's one of those things that's cooler just to experience what's going on in this, but a extremely creepy vibe, dark vibe film, but really, really love this. Ethan Embry, though, was great in this film. Definitely a different role for him as well. Has on here, though, a commentary track on here, a behind the scenes, a music video, but definitely one I recommend you guys check this one out. The next one here from Scream Factory as well. And I reviewed this one a while back, when I think a month or so back, when it just went to video on demand. And it's a movie called Jackals. This is from the director who directed Saw, the final chapter. This is basically, though, about these guys that end up kidnapping this kid who has gone, he's 20-something, and he ended up basically going missing. And, the parents really don't know where he was, and they ended up finding him and tracking him down and bringing him back to the house and tying him up. And this kid, though, has been, brainwashed by this cult, and they're trying to kind of get him back to reality. The girlfriend, is there. They haven't seen him in a really, really long time. It's a very weird experience, though, for, and then when this kid wakes up there, he sees his parents and his old girlfriend, and they're kind of sort of yelling at him and kind of trying to get him to come back, because he had vanished with this cult, and they don't really know what had happened or what he was up to. They have sort of an idea, but of course, though, when he's taken in, what ends up happening, though, is this cult kind of comes to the house, and they're outside of it, and they're all wearing these really creepy masks, and it becomes a home invasion type film. And it's got kind of a vibe of The Strangers to it, and it's all of them trapped in this house while these people are out there, and it's kind of them, what they're going to do and try and sort of survive the whole thing, and and they sort of find out too, what this son had gotten into. But actually a pretty cool, different take on a home invasion film. Has on here, though, a commentary track, as well as interviews with cast and crew on this one. This is so cool. This one now has finally gotten a release, because this movie, I remember seeing the trailer for this one back in 2007. It was supposed to actually have a big theatrical release, and then it got pulled, and then it never ended up actually releasing. And I think it might have gone on video on demand a couple years back, and then that was it, and it never had a physical release. And this is the director of this, did the Quarantine remake. He's did As Above, So Below, a bunch of different movies. And this is a movie called the Poughkeepsie tapes. I'm not sure if I'm not saying it right for sure. This is basically, it sort of has the vibe of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer a little bit. That kind of thing with the tapes and stuff. Because in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, they were taping all the murders and stuff. And this is about these they discover all these tapes in this house. There was like I got over a couple hundred tapes, and it's all these tapes of this guy who was like this terrible murderer, and he was, taping everything that he did, and it's kind of done in a documentary, found footage style vibe of like them, talking about this serial killer and what he had done, and then they cut to the tapes, and they say, oh, there's still all these tapes we haven't gone through, and the tapes get worse and worse and worse, and it was kind of stuff with him, with, kind of the picking up people, like he was like hitchhiking, and all these kind of terrible things that he was doing to people, and how he was killing them. And it's like these real gruesome type tapes, like I said, with the style, a little bit of like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. But it's actually a pretty cool movie. It's crazy too, like I said, that it was done in 2007, and like, it's so cool though that now it finally actually has a release, because it's one of those ones too you'd always see like at conventions. They'd have like bad quality bootlegs and stuff of it. So it's cool that now it actually has a physical release, like legit release, and so cool that Scream Factory had put this one out. It has on here though new interviews on here with the writer and director on here, as well as the actress from this film, but definitely a pretty cool one here. This one, I love this movie. This is from Shout Factory. This stars Mia Goth, who was recently in A Cure for Wellness, and this is like the kind of movies that I really like, these kind of films. These sort of like, it's a movie called The Survivalist, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic movie. You don't find out too much about exactly, they kind of leave it up in the air of why it's like what had kind of happened in the world, but it's about this guy though living out in the middle of the woods by himself, and he kind of has his own thing that he's doing, and he's trying to grow food, and he has like some unique kind of weird ways that he's growing the food as well, but he's out there growing this food, sort of surviving out there, and one day randomly he's just sort of sees out there Mia Goth and her mother's character, and they end up kind of spotting him, and she kind of wants to see if they can kind of live with him and sort of get out and find somewhere to live, because they see that he's got food there, and she basically says, you can have my daughter, if sleep with my daughter and stuff, if you let us stay here. And he like reluctantly agrees, and then they kind of allow her, them to stay there. And it's pretty much though about them surviving out there, and you're sort of seeing all the stuff that he does. It's a real slow burn character piece. But to me, I thought this was just so well done. I really love this movie. And, of course, though, there's some conflicts in this one, too. And then there's some really, like, weird stuff that ends up happening too. But there's, of course, that something is going to happen here to disrupt things and mess things up in here. But I like these kind of things. Like they did one with Ellen Page called like Into the Forest, and all these kind of ones that are post-apocalyptic kind of movies out in the middle of the woods. I always like these kind of ones, and I feel like this is probably one of the most interesting of those type of movies in a really long time. I liked all the characters in this one. Always a fan of Mia Goth as well. And I don't know, this is one, if you guys have seen this one, let me know what you thought of this, but I really, really like this one a lot. The next one here from Universal, and this is one that I was so excited to see. I've always been a fan of these films. I feel like these are probably two of some of the films, like some of the earliest horror movies I remember seeing. Of course, when I first saw these, I saw like the edited versions on TV. I used to always, as a kid, like tape stuff off like USA and, Up All Night and Joe Bob Briggs, Monster Vision, all that kind of stuff. So I was always taping horror movies and stuff. And I remember the Chucky movies, the Child's Play films, were some of those ones that I was always taping, the first three, and like, was obsessed with these movies. Always had like the dolls, the Chucky doll. I remember winning in the fair. So always just been a huge fan of these movies. This is the brand new film, Cult of Chucky, and this one picks up right after Curse of Chucky. If you know that one, though, it was about a the woman who was in a wheelchair, and if you know what happened in that one, there was all these people that got killed, and it was sort of her now blamed for all these murders, because of course she said, no, it wasn't me that killed all these people in the house, it was Chucky that did it, and they think she's crazy. So she's now been in the, mental asylum, and she's been, for good behavior, moved into a lesser, kind of like less security mental asylum. So she's out there, and of course, though, now Chucky somehow ends up at the asylum. and then people sort of start dying there. I don't want to say too much about this because as you know too, that the Andy character is back in this film, and I don't really want to say what he does in this one because I don't want to ruin too much about the other film. All that you really need to know though is that it's her, the woman from the wheelchair in the last movie, who's now in the asylum, and then of course Chucky, like I said, is there. This one kind of reminded me like a little bit of like maybe a little bit like of the third one a little bit, sort of kind of vibe to that one. The thing that I kind of liked about this one too was it was all done, like the Chucky's now done like, the old classic style when it's all like done the puppetry work and the animatronics and all that classic throwback style to it. And the movie though, it does have a few things to it that are kind of confusing. How are they doing this, and some of the things that they're explaining, well, wait a minute, that was how this happened. But overall though, I really like this movie. Like I said, I've always really loved the Chucky movies. Really love the cover on this one, the lenticular cover on this. It has on here though deleted scenes with a commentary track. It has a making of on here. It has a thing here talking about how they did the puppetry work and the mechanics work of the Chucky doll and animating it. But to me though, I love the setting, and I love how they gave it such a clinical, like weird vibe to the actual insane asylum. It has like a really like, it's all white walls and just like a very creepy, weird looking building and everything. I thought that was a cool aspect to this one. I definitely hope they continue on making these films. Like I said, I always love them, and I also love the humor to them, because I think like the first movie was a really serious film, and then as they went along, especially with Bride of Chucky, that's when it started to go into more of a comedy route, more comedic. And I kind of like that. I like kind of like jokiness of what Chucky says and stuff. But let me know below too what you guys thought of this one if you checked this one out. But definitely one, if you guys are a fan of the Chucky films, I would highly recommend that for sure. And the next one here from Lionsgate, this is one I was interested in seeing. It stars Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck. It's a movie called A Ghost Story. The director of this one did like Pete's Dragon, a number of different movies, and this is like kind of all in. It sort of reminds me of a Terrence Malick film a little bit, like a Tree of Life style like feeling to this film, and it's basically though about Casey Affleck, who's married to Rooney Mara in the film. He ends up getting in this accident and dying. And it's all about like the aspect of death and how someone, when they die, you always sort of feel like they're sort of with you, and because like right after he dies, you see this character who's wearing the ghost, like a sheet, like a ghost, in this house, and he's, the ghost is sort of haunting Rooney Mara's life. And her life sort of drastically changes the way she feels about things. She's kind of like in a very depressed state, and you see the ghost character kind of following her around everywhere she is, and lurking and in the shadows, and in throughout the house. And it's like I said, it's all done in this, and it shows kind of throughout the time goes on how she's feeling, and about continuing on with like years through life. And it's a very interesting kind of take on the whole, like I said, the whole subject of death, and how, and it throughout the whole idea too of certain people who come and go from your life, and the feeling of people are always sort of with you. And like I said, it's all done in that sort of, style of Tree of Life, if you know what I mean, like that sort of vibe to it. I actually kind of thought this was a pretty cool movie. It's a very like gloom, sort of sad feeling film, but always love, Rooney Mara, and I thought like this one definitely was an interesting kind of take, like I said, on the subject of death. It has on here though a featurette of the film, a deleted scene, a story, a featurette on the music on this one, as well as a commentary track on this one. This is one here I was really interested in watching. I love all the last, the two other open water films. This movie is Open Water 3, Cage Dive. And this one, when I heard about this, set in a cage, I was thinking is it going to be very, very similar to 47 Meters Down. But no, this one is not like all in the cage. The basis, though, is on going to a cage dive, but it's all not inside of the cage and stuff like, 47 Meters Down. This one is basically about these three friends who go to Australia on a trip, and it's all, I guess, of course, with the other open water films as well, it's done in the found footage style. And this is kind of done found footage mixed with like a documentary, because in the very beginning of this movie, you see this diver finds this video camera, and down in the middle of the ocean, picks it up, and then it kind of cuts to this documentary saying about how documentary news story about how this ship, this boat where they were doing like the cage dives had capsized, and a bunch of people had gone overboard, and there was shark attacks, and 3 Americans were missing, and of course the 3 Americans are missing are on this tape that they discovered, and then it cuts to the footage. Also cuts to some family members too talking about them, and you see the footage and you kind of see their trip. And the reason for them filming the whole thing was they were filming a audition tape for this show to try and win like $100,000 for like a Survivor kind of challenge type show. So they had to film like a 10-minute audition tape. So they were like, oh yeah, a great audition with us, going to Australia, doing some crazy stuff, and they have to like introduce themselves, and we're going to go on this cage dive. And I think that kind of looked like a cool thing to film. But of course, like I said, when they're out in the cage, the boat ends up capsizing, and it's the 3 of them trapped out there in the middle of the ocean while there's sharks out there, and it's kind of their survival and like the stuff that happens to them. And they added some interesting stuff in this one that I had not really seen in these kind of, found footage kind of stuck, like with the other films as well. But I don't know, I thought this was actually pretty cool though. And they did a pretty good job too with the effects of this one with the sharks, because the movie has a huge basis on the sharks, and the sharks actually have to look good. And I thought they actually did really a pretty decent job though, making the sharks look believable. And it has on here though a commentary track on here behind the scenes, and the behind the scenes is talking about how they did the effects and stuff, as well as deleted scenes, outtakes on this one. But definitely would recommend you guys check that one out. This one here was another one I was interested in seeing. This is a new Wesley Snipes movie called Armed Response. The cover, you can't really tell as much from this cover, but it is more of a horror film, and it's in the beginning of this one, you see this like compound government building where they have like jail cells and kind of government stuff going on in there, and you can tell like at first I was like, well, is this like a training mission or something? But something bad had happened, and something is in this building, and people are kind of running from it and stuff. And you see Wesley Snipes' character going to kind of this house in the middle of nowhere to get this guy who was the first kind of built the buildings, security systems, and their cameras, and all these kind of, and he also built this kind of thing where he could like read people through this device. And you see like Gene Simmons' character getting because Gene Simmons produced this movie, and he has a small part in this, and you see him kind of when they can kind of read someone and like what they're thinking and stuff. Well, he ends up going to the building though, because something had happened and they lost contact with the people who were inside of it, and they all, of course, all go there, and he's like the guy who did the building, kind of, they all go in there to try and figure out exactly what had happened and what had happened to the people in there and why they've lost contact and everything. And then when they go in there, of course, something has happened, and there's people dead in there, and they're trying to kind of get to the bottom of what had happened to them and see if they can find any clues, and looking at the camera tapes and all that kind of stuff. And they find one survivor guy in there, and he's like this prisoner, and he's like locked inside this weird kind of like containment thing. So it's them trying to kind of figure out what had happened. I don't know, I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. It kind of reminded me a little bit like of that movie Virus a little bit, mixed with like an alien type film, and then like mixed with like Day of the Dead, like the idea of all like an underground kind of weird facility building. That sort of type of vibe to this one. This one has on here as well as a making of on this movie. The director of this one did the movie Teresa, which I always like that movie. You don't hear about that one too often. And then I think like a couple other ones as well, but I thought this one was actually kind of interesting. The next one I got from Lionsgate as well is a 4K release of Warm Bodies. I remember too when this first came out, I really liked this movie. It was definitely a different take on the whole zombie type film, because it was like a zombie love story, and it's about like the zombies too. There's different kind of stages of the zombies. Like the zombies, Nicholas Holt's character is, they kind of still have some of themselves still left, and some of their mind and thoughts are sort of still there. But then they have the zombies too that turn into like the full flesh-eating zombies, where like nothing of them is left, and they're just kind of these mindless like zombies with like they remember nothing of their past, in any shape or form whatsoever. And it's Teresa Palmer's character who's kind of going out, living out in this kind of compound with all the other survivors. They go out to get food one day and supplies and stuff, and like the people that she's with end up getting attacked and killed, and Nicholas Holt's character ends up saving her from like the other zombies, and he's a zombie, and kind of like as soon as he sees her, he kind of falls in love with her. And then like in his, because like the movie's like a lot of it's from his mind and what he's thinking and how he wishes he could remember his past and more about himself and who he really is and everything, but he kind of ends up falling in love with her. And like it's kind of like that, like this love story between her and him, and of course the like her father, though, is like the head of where they live, and he's all about killing these zombies and wiping them all out, and it becomes like a weird situation between her and her father as well. But it's basically, though, this love story between them, about them sort of getting to know each other, and once they're together too, and like seeing each other, and like, you know, he doesn't really say a whole lot or anything, but sort of parts of himself sort of start to come back to him a little bit, and that's essentially what this movie was. But like just a zombie love story. But I really love this movie. It's one of those ones, like I said, I remember when it first came out how much I really liked this. I got a totally different take. But as for the 4K though, if you guys, you know, do have a 4K player, definitely is, you know, a upgrade to the picture for sure. The big thing, like I always say with 4K, is the HDR, the high dynamic range, which is all about the contrast levels and the brightness levels. So it definitely does improve upon that for sure with that. But this is like a really fun movie, and the special features as well are on the 4K disc as well as the Blu-ray. But it has a bunch of different features on here, a lot of different featurettes on here, gag reel, theatrical trailers, commentary track, but just a really, really fun movie. Really, if you guys are a fan of zombie movies and kind of want a different take on them and haven't seen this one before, highly recommend this. And the next one here from Disney is the second 4K release that they put out. You know, the first one was Guardians of the Galaxy, the second Guardians of the Galaxy film. This is Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and definitely, though, I will have to say for the 4K, this is one of those ones, because sometimes with 4K, you don't always see, like, a huge, drastic difference. With this one, though, definitely, like, if you guys have 4K, this one totally, because, like, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies all kind of have a very, very dark, contrasty level films, and the contrast levels in these are really, you know, definitely pop so much to the whole look of this, because, like I said, they have real, like, the pirates and stuff, and you can really see, like, Johnny Depp's, like, the eyeliner and, like, the dirtiness that he has on his face and stuff when he's the Captain Jack Sparrow. These are just really, really fun movies. I didn't see the last Pirates of the Caribbean film before this one. I did see all the other ones. Like, somehow I totally missed that one. And this is, you know, basically, though, about, you know, Orlando Bloom's, you know, son in this one. And this is like, you know, because what happened to him, he was kind of cursed to the boat in, like, I think, like, the third movie, and, you know, and it's kind of him now with the curse on him, and, you know, his son figures out where he is, and kind of wants to try and figure out if he can kind of break this curse so his father can kind of come back from Davy Jones's boat and all that. So it's kind of him trying to figure out how to break the curse, as well as these pirates that are kind of after Captain Jack Sparrow, these ghost pirates, like real bad and like really creepy looking pirates. They're trying to find him because he has this kind of amulet thing that they need to try and get from him, so then they can kind of become free to, like, do as they want. And, you know, once Captain Jack Sparrow messes up and, like, does something, they kind of are able to, like, leave and kind of go after him. So it's kind of them trying to come after them, as well as Orlando Jones's son, Orlando Bloom's son character is kind of trying to, you know, find him as well, to try and figure out how he can, you know, get with Captain Jack's help, try and figure out how to free his father from the curse. I don't know, I thought it was actually a pretty fun movie. Like I said, if you know these films, though, they all have the same similar type vibe to them. This one has on here a bunch of different featurettes on here, talking about Returning to the Sea, some look on here, and they're talking about the legacy of these films here, as well as bloopers, deleted scenes, and a bunch of different stuff on here. But like I said, for 4K, though, definitely looks really great on 4K. And the next one here from Sony, and this is a really cool look to this cover. I definitely hope Sony does some more horror titles, like some catalog horror titles in this kind of look and style. And it's done like a aged VHS kind of tape, like a scuffed up. There's like scratches and kind of stuff like that around the side here. Like this really cool slipcover look. Underneath, though, it still has it as well, the kind of aged look, like an old videotape. And this is 976 Evil. It's a horror film that, you know, Robert Englund directed, and it stars Stephen Geoffreys, you know, from Fright Night. And it's kind of a cool movie, and it's one I hardly remembered. I had not seen this movie in such a long time. It also includes in here the alternate home video version of it, and it's actually in that version in VHS quality, so it's a cool throwback thing to see it in that version. As well as Robert Englund did a new commentary track on this as well. And it's basically, though, about this phone number where you could call it, and it's called, if you like want to talk, like the evil network phone number. And you kind of call there, and they give you like your horoscope and stuff like that. And this one guy, Stephen Geoffrey's cousin, I believe it's, yeah, his cousin calls this number, and then as soon as he calls this number, though, like weird stuff is starting to happen to him a little bit, and like, but really the weird stuff happens though to Stephen Joffrey's, because he finds the paper that that was advertising this number to call, and when he calls it, like he's the kind of guy that his mother kind of babies him. She doesn't let him really do much. She doesn't really have any friends. People at school are picking on him, but he calls this number, and as soon as he calls this number, things start to happen to him. He starts kind of changing and kind of going through this weird type of transformation and sort of starting to get this kind of weird kind of power to him. It's a very, very cool movie. It definitely has a kind of feel, like at least his character, Stephen Joffrey's character, kind of reminds me of his Evil Ed character a little bit from, the Fright Night film. But I don't know, I like this movie. Just a really cool, kind of underrated horror movie that you don't hear about too often. They made a sequel as well. I've never seen part 2 to this one. But I don't know, this is definitely one, looks great as well on Blu-ray. Like I said, definitely hope that Sony does more, retro horror titles and stuff. The next one here from Anchor Bay is a TV series starring Pierce Brosnan called The Sun. It's a show that airs on AMC. This is an interesting one. The whole vibe of this show, it's kind of showing like this family, and it shows them like throughout the years. It's like over a span of 150 years, but it's like the same actors playing the characters over these years, and it kind of shows the family, during like the time, like the I can't remember what year it starts, like the 1830s or something like that, early 1800s, and it kind of shows the war with like the Native Americans that are going on and the stuff like that, and then it shows them like cuts kind of around at different times throughout their family's like generation, and like the stuff that's going on with them later in their life, and how something that they did years back kind of affects them. And it's sort of like that. It's a very hard to explain type show, but it's an interesting concept the way the whole thing was done, about showing how something kind of from the past can kind of affect you in the future, in the present, and the present of when this takes place, and then like the characters throughout the years. And I like too, it was kind of like I said, the same characters playing them older, but then they kind of look the same. It's an interesting kind of take on the whole thing. And it has on here, though, deleted scenes on this one as well. This one from Anchor Bay as well. And this is a movie that I think this is from like a couple years back and finally has gotten a release. And it's a movie that James Wan produced here called Demonic. And this is basically, though, that these like college, this police is going to this house where these kids were killed, and they're trying to figure out exactly what had happened, because all the group of these kids were killed in this house, and the police, like, there was one guy who, like, there was a couple of them that were missing, but they found one guy in there, and they're kind of talking to him and trying to get to the bottom of, like, kind of what had happened to them in this house, and what had happened to all of the friends, and, how they ended up, dying, because it's like these friends had gone there to try to do, like, a paranormal investigation type of this house, because they kind of heard about the history of this place, so they all kind of went there. And every time that you do something like that, it's not going to go well. And of course, like you saw in the beginning of this, a bunch of people had died, and it's kind of the police, though, trying to get to the bottom, though, of what had happened and where the people that are gone missing as well are. And it's kind of them talking to the one guy and trying to figure out what, get information from him, because he's like the only person really that can tell them what had happened. But a kind of a creepy, kind of haunted house, paranormal investigation type film here. The next one here, Warner Brothers sent over a free copy of this one to check out, and this one is one that you guys know is out, and this is the complete 6th and final season of Two Broke Girls, the Kat Dennings show. I like this show. Like, this one, I have not watched all the episodes of it, but it's kind of like, and it's one of those shows too that I remember when I first watched it, I didn't realize too that it's kind of a little bit more of like off the wall, kind of raunchy, more adult, some of the jokes and stuff than I thought it was going to be, like some kind of weird, kind of like silly, ridiculous kind of jokes and stuff in this. And it was basically, though, about these two girls that work in this diner, and for this, Jennifer Coolidge, I may be saying her name wrong, but, Stifler's mother from the American Pie films and a lot of the Christopher Guest films, but they work for her. But in the newest season, the final season of the show, they ended up now opening up their own kind of dessert bar, and they're also part owners of the old diner as well. It's kind of them trying to open up their business and get things going and figure it out, as well as, like, they're having their own sets of problems and stuff, and, stuff with their other job as well. But it's just, I don't know, I think this is actually a pretty funny show. It's a shame, though, that it's now ended now. You know, it's one of those things, though, maybe, like, you know, a couple years from now it will come back again in some other form, because a lot of shows, too, when if they end, like, somebody else down the line picks them up or they continue on, because it is a pretty funny show here. It has on here unaired scenes and a gag reel on this. The next one here from HBO, and this is an HBO original film about Bernie Madoff. And they made another Bernie Madoff film as well that came out like around the same time with Richard Dreyfuss. And this one is, you know, Robert De Niro playing Bernie Madoff. And this is a movie called The Wizard of Lies, like I said. And this is kind of like the whole thing about the whole, you know, because Bernie Madoff was like stealing all this money from super rich people and all the kind of the things that he was up to, and this is kind of his like showing what he was up to, and it's like showing too how it kind of affected his family and all the stuff that, you know, that they kind of knew, what they didn't know, and all the kind of the situations about the downfall of how things were starting to fall apart. But a pretty interesting, you know, film here, all about Bernie Madoff. If you guys are interested in this, this one, like I said, is one that's out now. This has on here an in-depth interview here with Robert De Niro and Michelle Pfeiffer, and Barry Levinson was the director of this one. And the last one here from RLJ Entertainment is a movie called Pilgrimage. This stars, you know, Tom Holland, who's, you know, from the, you know, star of, you know, Peter Parker from the newest Spider-Man series of films. You know, will be a series of films. And this one, like I said, is called Pilgrimage. And this is basically, though, it's kind of about these monks, and this was set in like 1305 or something, like early times, and it was like these monks that had to try and find this certain type of relic that they were trying to take this relic back, and it's kind of about their journey through like the sort of like the wilderness, not like the wildernessy kind of area, not really the wilderness, but like the open range, or I don't know what you'd say the area they're going through, but it's kind of like all throughout Europe, I guess, and it's kind of the people that they come across and the obstacles, because there's knights out there and people that are kind of coming after them that want this thing as well. So it's kind of about their whole pilgrimage and journey to try and get this relic to where they have to get it to. And it's interesting too, because like the parts of it are in some other languages and stuff too. And Tom Holland did a good job though with doing, because he had to speak like some other languages in this one. But a pretty interesting kind of like journey, like epic type film about them kind of going across, like I said, this whole terrain kind of area, almost like the Lord of the Rings type area. That kind of an area that they kind of go through. But has on here some behind the scenes featurettes on here, as well as a photo gallery and poster gallery on this one. But anyway, guys, that's all for this update video. Thanks again for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you guys later.